Welcome, everyone. It gives me a great pleasure to begin this session and welcome you all. First, a few housekeeping rules. You are now recorded, and it's important for you to know that so that you're aware of that. And also, I would like for all of you to be mindful that we have to be respectful for each other. So there will be a question and response session later. And just keep in mind that we will respect each other when we're asking questions. There will be a question and answer tab, and you can ask and write questions in that, and we will pick that up later. And these questions will be visible to all attendees and can be upvoted and commented upon. And we will endeavor to follow up any unanswered queries. So let me introduce myself. I'm Professor Therese Hoffenbeck, and I'm the Professor in Educational Assessment and Director of Oxford University Centre of Educational Assessment. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you all to this session, which we have called From International In-Person Studies to Remote Video Data Collection, Conducting Classroom-Based Research in a Pandemic. And I'm here today together with Dr. Tracy Denton Claylop-Rees, Dr. Samantha K. Johnson, and Dr. Juliet Scott Barrett, who will also present part of the research. And I'm happy also to say that both the videos of this session and the slides will be shared later. And for those of you who are following us on Twitter, that's one place where we will share our research slides. So the next slide, please. We have been thinking a lot about how things have changed. And I'm pretty sure, as for many of you who are together with us today, life is not as it was in 2019. I wanted to start this presentation with showing the research team in our center as it was in 2019 and 2020, where we did a cross-sectional comparison on students' critical thinking in the International Baccalaureate. And we did that funded by IB, which we also would like to acknowledge. At the time, the four of us, which you can see here, Kit Double, myself, Yasmin El-Masri, and Josh McRae, we were working together and could actually stand outside of Oxford University next to each other. And we planned a research study where we conducted research and collected data in Norway, Australia, and England. We were trying to find out how students would be able to develop critical thinking, as it was also a part of the IB program. But as you know, things changed. These were pre-pandemic times. And as we now move to the next slide, you will understand that the report we published in 2020 was very much impacted of what happened during the pandemic. If you go to the International Baccalaureate web pages, you can find the report free to download, the full report and a research summary. And despite doing this research during a pandemic situation, we are pleased with the outcome of it. But things changed. And we wanted to share both how we have done research, what kind of research we have conducted, and how we're currently conducting research in our center, because of realizing that we are all living in these changing times. Next slide, please. The research question we originally had for our research project was, which features of the diploma program are expected to foster the development and enhancement of critical thinking abilities in students? And how are these features integrated into the IB documentation? What is the relationship between participation in the diploma program and ability-based measures of critical thinking? And do diploma program students differ on average from their matched non-diploma program peers in their levels of critical thinking measures when other student characteristics are considered? And finally, in what ways do diploma students and teachers encounter, experience, and develop critical thinking skills? So when we designed this study before the pandemic, we planned to travel to England and Australia and Norway and collect data by interviewing both teachers and students in different schools. Next slide, please. But things changed. What we were able to do was to do document analysis of the IB curriculum. And we were also able to use a critical thinking skills assessment, the Cornell assessment, because we were able to send that both electronically and in paper. But the interviews were less than we had planned for. Next slide, please. And you can see that in the quantitative sample here, that in Australia, we had 200 non-IB students and 166 IB students, while in England, we were not able to have more than 21 IB students and none from non-IB schools, simply because the schools were locked down in March 2020 when we had planned to collect data. In Norway, we managed to collect data in 84 non-IB schools and in 95 students in IB schools. But the whole sample was, in a way, had an impact of the lockdown and the pandemic. Next slide, please. The literature review was conducted and done in December 2019. And one of the things which we found of interest there was to look carefully into all the different studies, theoretical studies, which had been conducted on critical thinking. And that has also been important and to inform us of future work, which we have been doing. Next slide, please. And one of the things we want to flag up is that when you're investigating critical thinking, one of the things which is very clear is that students and teachers very often do not have a similar understanding of the concept, such as critical thinking. And also the definitions, they very often varies. Next, please. The document analysis we did looked specifically at themes such as instruction and teaching, and outcomes and assessment and evaluation, and management policy and teacher development. And the reason why we wanted to have document analysis based on these themes is simply the fact that to enhance critical thinking or even to develop critical thinking, you need to look at the instruction and teaching, and also whether you can find any outcomes of it and how it is assessed. And we also know that if you want to implement anything in schools, you need to look at how the schools are organized, managed, and what kind of policies put in place, and whether teachers are actually allowed to have any form of training. Next, please. So in our report, if you download it, you will see how these different themes were coded and how we also developed coding systems for the interviews we had with teachers and students. Next, please. And you can also read about our main findings, which basically said that the IB schools had a strong focus on teaching critical thinking to all students, and that IB had a mixed approach to critical thinking development, which is in line with evidence-based best practice. We also emphasize that domain general critical thinking instructions is something which is said to be of importance. And in IB, they have something called theory of knowledge, which is a very good example of ways of developing this. And critical thinking is very often taught in relation to specific subject, and subject-specific teaching is very important, just like we know from previous research, when there's explicit goals, which is linked to the specific course and the specific subject, it's easier to develop these critical skills. In IB diploma, you also have something called extended essay, which is a special pathway for critical thinking development through one-to-one teacher-student mentorship. And we did find a lot of evidence of these measures. Next, please. The quantitative results, they actually showed that diploma students had significantly higher levels of critical thinking than the matched non-diploma students. But it was moderate effects, and we are a little bit cautious here. Next, please. because we do know that it was conducted, this research study, during a pandemic, and we do not have as high sample as we wanted to have. And I also want to say that we actually removed the students from England because of that. Next, please. Even more, we were cautious about the interview data, and so far we have not made very strong recommendation based upon the interviews because we had less students interviewed than we wanted to. But we can say that of those students we have interviewed and the teachers, they were very strongly in favor of the program they were part of. Next, please. As you can see from one student here from Australia who said that I think theory of knowledge develops your critical thinking skills because I think it makes you really be aware of how knowledge and its acquisition and production is significant to our everyday lives. And it makes you think about how there's also always two sides or more to things and how we can look at them from different perspectives and gain a greater understanding and a critical understanding of the significance of knowledge and acquisition. Next, please. So another student in England said that, like, looking at all these things from different perspectives, like seeing if your perception affects other things in your life, we even have that like outside of theory of knowledge, philosophical debates. And it's like, it's interesting to kind of like more time you play devil's advocate, and you kind of like, even though it's not your opinion, you still have to work around it and you just argue for the sake of having a counterpoint. Yeah, I love it. I think it's really cool. So this is students who are talking about the different ways that their teachers are facilitating for critical thinking development using theory of knowledge. And next, please. We also found in the teacher views that the diploma program enhances students' critical thinking skills and provides a comparative advantage to diploma program students. That was like the key message from the teachers. And the teachers also said they used mixed teaching approaches for critical thinking in line with best practice research. Next, please. So here you can see one teacher, which is a program coordinator from England, who says that I certainly see, for example, with my year 12 of this year at Theory of Knowledge, that they're starting to kind of question things much more. And I think a little bit more critically about where they're getting knowledge from and the fact that they're starting to doubt more things. So that's seen as something positive. And another teacher, which is English and anthropology teacher from England, says, I think the material, like the syllabus for all the subjects, requires you to include critical thinking. You can't do well, let alone very well, without critical thinking. Next, please. And finally, a teacher from Australia said, the great thing about the IB is that it's got all the big picture stuff about critical thinking and ideas, but does not at all sacrifice any of the little bits. And so there's this understanding that critical thinking is built on the little bits, and you actually need to have foundation discipline knowledge to make connections. Whereas South Australian Certificate of Education is all about starting to make connections before you even go in the discipline knowledge, right? Next. I would say that the work we did on critical thinking basically started when we could travel to countries, meet students and teachers, and collect data and be part of what was seen as normality. But over the winter 1920, the pandemic changed that completely. And when we started working on new research projects, and when we also had to adjust this current research project, we had to realize that there were some limitations to our study. Part of it is that in our critical thinking study, we had self-selection as participants in the interviews. They volunteered, and we do know that usually that will be a biased group. But even more, the COVID-19 made it impossible to conduct the planned interviews in Norwegian schools, as well as 3 additional schools in England, because they closed down. And I will just remind people that this happened at a time, March 2020, which was before we had gotten used to Zoom or Teams, and we did not quite know how to conduct research. And also, it happened at a time where schools closed down and teachers had to quickly try to figure out how to teach their students online. It took some months before the classrooms and teachers and students and parents felt that they knew how to do things. But later now, we are in a different position and we're all getting more used to things. At the same time, we have to say that as a research group at Oxford University, like everyone else, we were hoping and crossed our fingers that the pandemic would pass. And we wrote new research grants, also based upon our experiences with a critical thinking study. And we were invited to also collaborate with IB and Acer, and we decided to go for a new research project and wrote a proposal for Jacobs Foundation the summer of 2020. And my colleague, Deputy Director, Associate Professor Josh McGrain and I worked hard to write a research study on how we could conduct research in classrooms and try to figure out how you can assess curiosity and creativity in classrooms. And we were thinking about video recording these classrooms globally and try to collect data to understand better how to facilitate these practices. But although we were extremely happy to be awarded a new funding for the new research project we will soon hear more about, unfortunately, the pandemic were here to stay. And as we started and planned the new research study, we had to realize that the new research team had to grasp with how to adjust and how to adapt a research study where you have to collect data online, including video data. And that's what Juliet will tell us all about now. So I hand over to Dr. Juliet Scott-Barrett.
Thank you so much, Therese, and thank you for giving such a wonderful presentation. I'm going to be talking for a little while about the Promising Practices study, where we're looking at facilitating creativity and curiosity in classrooms. And I will speak for a little bit and then I'll be introducing the rest of the research team, which is on the next slide. And you'll see that the team is made up of 5 of us. So you've just heard from our principal investigator, Professor Hopfenbeck. We also have Associate Professor Joshua McGrain, Dr. Tracy Denton-Calabrese, Dr. Samantha K. Johnson, and myself. Next slide, please. So we are really fortunate to be funded by the Jacobs Foundation, which is a foundation that works internationally to support educational opportunities for young people. Next slide. Thank you. And we're also very lucky to have other research partners, including the International Baccalaureate, who have been supporting us in engaging with schools. So we're very grateful for their support in finding excellent and enthusiastic participants for our research. And we're also very grateful to the Australian Council for Educational Research, who've conducted 2 in-depth literature reviews, which have informed the direction of this research. We'd also like to thank our expert advisor, Professor Marta Bikstad Ballas from the University of Oslo, who is giving us really valuable advice on the way that we conduct the research, particularly the use of video cameras and capturing classroom activities. Next slide, please. Okay, so on the screen, you'll see our research question, and I'll give you a moment to read through that. But you can see that we're focusing particularly on these key skills of curiosity and creativity. So over the next few slides, I will be giving a short introduction to what is creativity and what is curiosity. So on this next slide, we'll see that creativity is usually conceptualized in 2 ways. So there's big C creativity, or sometimes called eminent creativity, which is quite rare. And it's usually associated with inventions and ingenuity. And there's also small c creativity, or everyday creativity, which describes the little ideas that enrich and enhance our lives. And both small c and big C creativity are essential in order to meet the challenges of this new world and its unknowns, And we also know that small c creativity can serve as useful building grounds for higher levels of creativity. So it would seem that small c creativity can support the development of big C creativity. Next slide, please. And research so far suggests that training and practice, especially training that involves real life scenarios, can support the development of creativity. And we also understand that psychological safety and social environments that really value divergent thinking and abstract processes seem to support creativity as well. But the question in our research is, what are the promising practices that can foster this, and what are the practical things that happen in classrooms that can support this creativity? Next slide, please. It's also interesting to see that there's a strong relationship between curiosity and creativity, both in terms of cognitive traits such as openness and imagination, and behavioral traits or behavioral traits such as exploratory behaviors. Next slide, please. So this research uses the informational gap model of curiosity, which is broken down into 3 processes. So curiosity occurs when an individual recognizes that they have a gap in their information or a gap in their understanding. They anticipate that it's possible to close this gap, and they are motivated to close this gap. So that's kind of 3 processes that people move through when they are feeling curious. Next slide, please. And we'll see on this slide that there is great research into the way that curiosity can be a powerful motivator for not only creativity, but also for subjective well-being. So meta-analyses suggest that there's a strong relationship both between creativity and curiosity, but also there are strong links with positive psychological outcomes, such as open-mindedness and feelings of autonomy and competence and belonging. And the research of Kashdan and colleagues and Shin and Kim have showed these strong relationships. So how does our study aim to build on previous research and explore these important skills in more depth? I'm going to hand over to my colleague Tracy, who will be giving a little bit more information about the way that we are going to be conducting this research.
Thank you very much, Juliet. As Professor Hoffenbeck has mentioned, we had originally planned to visit schools and collect video data. However, we had to change our plans due to COVID restrictions. So instead, we adopted a collaborative, participatory video approach for this study. This approach allows teacher participants to control the camera and what is presented. And we consulted with teachers we'll be consulting with teachers throughout the entire process to get feedback and make adjustments if necessary. Next slide, please. Teacher participants were given an online pre-engagement survey developed to help us understand more about how they facilitate curiosity and creativity in students. Consultation sessions were also conducted, and they provided an introduction to the study and to the research team, a participatory session to increase understanding about the ethical considerations for participating in the research, and an introduction to our video recording protocol to ensure teachers are able to self-capture high-quality video recorded lessons. Next slide, please. Teachers will be submitting 3 video recorded lessons that they feel demonstrate how to best facilitate curiosity and creativity in students. And we have tested and put together a toolkit for this, which we will be sending to participants. My colleague Sam will talk more about this shortly. Next slide. We will be conducting online video recorded interviews with teachers via Teams soon after they submit each lesson. The interviews will be centered around specific video clips that the research team will select. We also plan to interview with teachers' assistants 3 to 4 target students that they select to ask about their experience of the lesson that was recorded. Next slide, please. To understand more about student levels of curiosity and creativity, we will administer a short online questionnaire and activity. The 10-item questionnaire is designed to measure their levels of curiosity. The creativity task is an adapted version of the Guilford's 1967 alternate uses task. Student participants will be asked to list the uses of 3 common objects to measure their levels of divergent thinking. Next slide, please. It was really important for us to have teachers from around the world with a variety of backgrounds to participate in the study. From the map, you can see we have participants in several areas of the world. I'm happy to say that we currently have 6 schools and 22 teachers participating, and we're still in the process of working to recruit additional schools. This includes 2 to 5 teachers from each school who teach students between the ages of 8 and 12. Children in this age range are usually able to discuss abstract ideas like curiosity and creativity. Next slide, please. We're really fortunate to have the International Baccalaureate as one of our partners, as we are conducting this research in their schools. To assist with recruitment, they posted information about the study in their newsletters and on their social media channels. From those channels, a list of interested schools was generated, and the research team used that list to examine the websites and social media accounts of interested schools. We conducted purposive sampling, focusing on our specific criteria for the project, locating schools that explicitly articulated in words and demonstrations via their websites or social media accounts, a variety of strategies for the facilitation of curiosity and creativity. In addition, we wanted a diverse global sample with schools represented from various countries, cultures, and socioeconomic status groups, and schools where there is a possibility for extending the project to include middle years and diploma programs at each site. We then contacted each school. The contact was usually the IB coordinator for the primary years program. We included a link to the IB blog about the research and also some initial information about the project. For example, its aim, what participation involves, and the benefits of participation. Knowing how busy teachers are, particularly during this year, we also assured them that we would work around their schedules and fully support them through the research process. My colleague Sam will now talk about the technical and ethical considerations and the data analysis plan for the study.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Now I would like you to take a moment to imagine being a teacher in a busy classroom. You may or may not have had much experience with video recordings. You've just recorded a 45-minute lesson only to find out that you could neither hear the clear nor see the contents of your video. For these reasons, and in addition to the fact that video is one of our main data sources, it was important for us to secure the technical requirements of this study, which simply refers to the clarity of picture and sound. So technical considerations in this study, they're really guided by what we refer to as a purpose-driven framework. Now you must be wondering or asking yourself, what exactly is a purpose-driven framework? Now, one of the key considerations in choosing what, where, and how to record really depends on the purpose for which the recording is being sought. Generally speaking, there are 2 types of videos that teachers are asked to record. The first one can be documentation videos, which really is geared towards improving practice. And the second is demonstration videos, which are a bit more high stakes and they serve to prove practice. Now, given our aim in this current study, which is really to document the promising practices that foster curiosity and creativity, the technical considerations that underpin documentation videos were really prioritized. Now, to facilitate the ease of recording and also the ease of transfer, we decided to use something that you perhaps have right in front of you at this very moment, a mobile or a smartphone. Now, the reason why we selected the mobile phone was because of its low, it's really cost effective. And we find that in documentation video approaches, this is one of the camera types that's technically used. And it's, when we think about the advances in mobile technology, the mobile phone offers us with good quality picture and sound as well. Now, we were really wanting or to ensure that the video camera setup was really unobtrusive. And so we decided to place the camera at the back of the classroom. And similar to what my colleague Tracy mentioned, the teachers were in control of the video recordings. Now, I would be remiss if I did not mention that some of the principles that underpin demonstration videos, they were really important for a study, in part because of the requirement to really collect data remotely. So for example, we adopted what we called an enterprise approach, which means that we provided the teachers with the video recording equipment, as opposed to the bring your own device approach, in which case teachers usually use their own mobile technologies. But this enterprise approach was really essential for us, and it gave us greater control over the audio quality of the recordings for students. So we use what we refer to as a Jabra speakerphone, which would be placed around the desks or the tables of target students. And we also had greater control over the audio of teachers. So we use the Rode Wireless, or rather we'll be using the Rode Wireless microphone system. Now, one of the key things that we also want to highlight is that through using this enterprise approach, we really had the opportunity to equip teachers with technical knowledge. So we prepared a protocol, a 10-step detailed protocol, just to provide teachers with a little bit more insight into how to configure the recording devices. And we also recorded short demonstration videos, just so it would be a little bit more easier for them to configure the devices. Now, naturally, when we think about recording, whether it be audio or video, this naturally raises concerns or questions with regards to how can we ensure that we maintain the ethical or manage the data in an ethical way. Now, unsurprisingly, one of the key concerns with recording audio or video really relates to privacy and confidentiality. And we do appreciate that some parents and students might opt not to participate in the study, and as such, they may not want their faces or audience to be in the scene of the video. So throughout our consultation sessions, we've really advised teachers to ensure that they place the camera in a strategic way, if possible, to not capture these non-participating students. However, we were also mindful of the fact to ensure to advise teachers to ensure that they include these non-participating students to reduce any feelings of exclusion. We're also mindful that even though we might not capture the faces of these non-participating students, there's every likelihood or possibility that we might capture their audio. And in this instance, we'll just exclude them from the analysis. But an interesting question to really think about is what if there are some minor technical difficulties, what if we're unable to hear the audio of participating students, or students who have actually consented to participate? Is it okay for us to increase the volume of their voices using editing software? Well, according to what the research tells us in the video literature, we're able to do just that, but we have to gain consent from the participants to do that. But this question also raises another important consideration. So what if the lowered voices on the part of teachers and students, what if it was really meaningful or intentional, such that students, for example, might be a bit nervous to speak on camera? So this is why it was important for us to have interviews with our participants, just to get a more comprehensive insight into the context of the video recording. And in this way, we realize that participants do have some level of control over how we interpret and how we present their data. So it's not surprising if participants then ask, is the video data mine? Is it yours or is it ours? Well, according to the ethical rulings of Oxford University, the team, the OUCEA team, we do have control over how the data is handled within the study. But this just raises some other concern with regard to the data rights of participants. Can participants actually gain access to their video recordings? Well, this is an important consideration. It's a bit tricky, especially within the context of video data, especially where on video data we have multiple identities. So a useful first step is to really consider or ask participants what are some of the main reasons why they would like access to a copy of their video data. And what we found through our teacher consultations sessions is that more often than not, teachers just want the recording for professional development purpose. And we find that having these conversations with teachers, it's quite imperative and essential because it provides an opportunity to discuss what could go wrong if video data is shared widely within the public domain. And it also gives us an opportunity to, for example, provide different alternatives to teachers who might want these video clips for professional development reasons. And we usually advise that at the end of the study, we'll be providing short clips so that they can engage with the clips a little bit more to learn how to foster curiosity and creativity in the classroom. And this sharing or dissemination of video clips, it raises another interesting ethical concern. So it wouldn't be surprising if teachers then ask, can the video data be public and private at the same time? And in fact, yes, we plan to do that. And the videos that we share with the wider public will be agreed upon with the participants, but we can also use filtering mechanisms to reduce any form of revealing of identities on the video. What we've also found, and is really a good recommendation when you're disseminating videos, is to ensure that you provide metadata with your video dissemination. So for example, any information about classroom background or classroom context can give people a little bit more insight into the context of the video recording so that any conclusions made with regards to that video data is a little bit more accurate. Now, finally, after gathering such a rich data set from the video recordings, the interviews, and the student tasks, how exactly will we be engaging in video analysis? Now, with the number of participants that we have confirmed, we expect to receive about 45 video recordings, each being about 30 to 45 minutes in length. One of our main considerations in this regard is really determining what exactly will we be analyzing on these video recordings, which really brings us to a very important point. So we're primarily concerned with identifying patterns throughout the data, and as such, the videos that we select will be mainly for the purposes of data mining. Of course, this will be underpinned or driven by what we call a part-to-whole deductive approach, in which we use a creativity and curiosity codebook that we previously developed using resources such as a literature review that was previously developed by Acer, as well as resources from our previous engagement with the literature. So we will firstly engage with viewing the recordings individually, and then we'll have social viewings where we come together as a team to determine what exactly is it that we need to analyze in further details. I must mention that as part of this social viewing process, we will be engaging in a process that we call member checking. And this is just so we can present portions of interesting clips that we find to the participants, so to students and teachers, just to ensure that we can have a little bit more insight and accuracy into the context of the data. We'll then generate content logs and also transcription of interview and video data, and also then engage in systematic coding via NVivo. And I just want to highlight here that this process will, even though it seemingly looks to be linear, it's actually one that will be done quite iteratively. And so we also expect to find any unanticipated events that we might not have had in our creativity and curiosity codebook. And then finally, with our curiosity and creativity student tasks, we'll be generating rating data and more quantitative data from those tasks. And so we'll analyze that using SPSS. So these are some of the key things that we wanted to highlight to you today. And we just want to just say thank you for participating in our session today, and just we hope from our study that this multi-site study, this multi-perspective in-person and remote video data collection approaches that we've used, we hope that we can document our key skills such as critical thinking, curiosity, and creativity can be fostered in the classroom as they underpin solutions to some of the world's biggest challenges. So thank you so much for engaging with us, and we're quite excited to hear your suggestions and also your comments.
Thank you so much, Julia, Tracy, and Sam for presenting our video study. And I really welcome also now questions from the audience. I have to say that we wanted to talk to you about ongoing research and also previous research, because we wanted to emphasize how researchers these days have had to change and adapt during the pandemic.